Hello, welcome back to Tea Time Thursday with Heart of Texas Tea House. I'm Jennifer, the owner, and I am excited to come hang out with you for a little bit this afternoon as we have a little tea and talk about tea, of course. Today's topic is what are the differences between black tea, green tea, white tea. You may have even heard some other funnier names of tea like pu'er, and we'll just kind of briefly go over those today while we sit on a cup of tea. I have my tea steeping right now. It should be ready shortly. Go ahead and grab your cup of tea, and if you have a snack you want to eat while you listen to this, because what is tea time without a snack, right? So while my tea steeps, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out, and hit the notification bell so you get your notifications on when I share a new video. Right now we're doing about one every other week as far as our tea times go. Hopefully we'll get that built up in time. So today, like I said, we're gonna discuss the different types of teas. That's our topic today. And I have some tea to show you so you can kind of see the leaf itself and maybe see the differences between the two. Sorry, nose. And so, it will not be an in-depth overview because nobody wants to spend an hour having tea, right? Although we might want to enjoy that time, but we don't always have that time. So we're gonna make it short, and we're just gonna give you kind of a brief idea of the differences so you know when somebody asks, what's the difference between a black tea and a green tea other than color? Like, what's the difference? And you will be somewhat knowledgeable of being able to tell them that. So, funny story about tea. Did you know who started or who found tea? Did you know? I didn't know, but I found out. And so it was the Emperor Shen Nung. And I'm probably saying the name wrong, but Shen Nung of China. One day he was boiling some water for his afternoon whatever he was working on, and maybe he was gonna cook something, or maybe he was just having a cup of hot water boiling out some of the, there's my timer for my tea, yay. He could have just been boiling out some of the nastiness from his water. I don't know, that was a long time ago, and nobody's around today who spoke to him and said, hey, why did you do that? Well, this leaf just randomly dropped in his hot boiling water. And he's like, okay, whatever, didn't care. Kind of like when your kids eat the food off the ground, it has something extra along with it. He didn't care, he's like, okay, whatever. So he just let it sit there and steep. And next thing you know, he enjoyed it. He enjoyed it so much that it became a thing. Here we are, who knows of how many hundreds of years later, maybe even 1,000 years later, I don't know. I don't have a time frame of when this emperor did it, but we have tea, right? So just a funny little story on that. And I have my green tea now. It is ready. Look at that beautiful color of green tea. It's funny because green tea isn't really, truly green, but oh man, it's so good. It's the Moroccan mint, and I'm putting it in my mason jar today. So I went ahead and warmed my mason jar first with some hot water because I do not want to shock my mason jar. I do recommend doing that if you want to use one of my mason jars for your hot tea. I'm sorry, my nose is itching today. And so I'm gonna have me some hot tea. So pretty. All right. Now, I don't usually drink my tea sweet, but when I have hot tea, I do like a little bit of honey. So I'm gonna grab me some honey real quick. Get my honey mixed in there. I know this afternoon just felt like a mint tea afternoon. So here we are having some mint tea. Cheers. Oh, so good. So good. All right, well, back to it. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you about tea is where it comes from. Yes, it originated in China. You can actually find the plant that is used all over the world now, but there are just a handful of countries that really mass produce and sell, and the majority of those are in Asia. So the plant itself is the Camellia sinensis plant, or the Camellia assamica plant. Sorry, if you see me looking away, I have notes because some of these words are a little tricky to say, and so I want to make sure I tell them to you correctly. So the Camellia sinensis and the Camellia assamica, and when you see it on the tea bag, it is Assam. You see it as Assam. So the Camellia sinensis and the Camellia Assam. The Camellia sinensis is a smaller leaf, and it's what you get out of China. And the Camellia Assam is what we get, is a larger leaf that we get out of India. Okay, so there's the main plants. All tea that comes from the Camellia sinensis plant has caffeine. The only way to strip it of caffeine is to chemically process the tea. So if something says that it has no caffeine, A, it probably still has a minute amount because there's no way to possibly remove it, all of it. And B, it's either not from the Camellia sinensis plant, so it's not the same as actual tea, or it has been chemically stripped of it, of the caffeine, in which case it's really no longer got all the vital good stuff that comes out of tea. And that's a whole nother topic on caffeine, how much is in each type of tea, how to reduce your caffeine intake. We will definitely do a video on that later, and maybe our next one, I don't know, we'll see. But it all has caffeine, unless it's an herbal tea or a rooibos tea, which we will go over what those two are and the differences. It does have caffeine, or at least some amounts of caffeine. What changes with the caffeine though is when, like what part of the year they pluck the leaf, how far it's been growing and whatnot in its developmental stage. So at that point, it can change the caffeine amount, or even how it's processed sometimes can change how much caffeine is in it, because of how it's been oxidized or possibly fermented, or there's just different aspects to it that change how it is done. Okay, so the color and flavor and aroma of the tea leaves also change depending on what time of the year it's been plucked, and if it's a baby leaf or a full adult leaf, okay? So just some little different intricacies there on that. So loose leaf tea is really the process of keeping the leaves in their most natural state. It's believed that it's what also gives you the best benefit of tea because it's not been so overly processed. So, and we're gonna see these here in a little bit, but this is white tea, which is one of the least processed teas altogether. And you can see, I mean, these are some pretty full leaves. Oh, camera. So you can tell, I mean, this is just almost its most natural state, as though it just popped off the bush and they said, oh, package it up, right? So the least processed it is, the better, okay? All right, so our second way of processing tea is called the cut, tear, and curl. And that process is really, it's a machine driven process. So they put it through a machine, the machine goes, chops it up to a finite way so that the same leaf can be utilized in a greater broad spectrum. It's typically what you get when you go to a mass produced restaurant, someplace where they're just getting bulks of tea. They don't care if they sell it or not. It's cheap. Sometimes it's more bitter. Sometimes it's just not as good. It's more grainy. But because they're not taking this time to fully process it and leave it in its more natural state, it becomes cheaper because they can just mass produce it and go on. So there's your 2 ways of having your tea, okay? As far as production goes. Now, our first tea we're going to talk about today is our white tea, okay? So I already kind of showed it to you, white tea, and I'm going to angle my camera so you can see these a little easier as I talk about them. This is a white tea. You can see the leaves are pretty much intact, and they're intact. This is my peach white, and so there's a big chunk of peach, and you can really see the full leaf, okay? The full leaves in these. It's fun. It's almost like you went outside and just raked the leaves after they dried on the ground and then put it in your tea. But it's not the same as your tree leaves unless you happen to have a Camellia sinensis plant. And I do have a garden in the backyard, so maybe one of these days I'll order one and see how it goes. Seems interesting, but for now, I'll get what I can, right? But the white tea, it is picked, allowed to wither. So withering, just kind of shrink up, right? Wither it, and then air dried, and that's it. Okay, so the white tea, picked, withered, air dried, done. Okay, and that's it. And then packaged. And so mine is packaged with some sun-dried peaches, organic sun-dried peaches, no additional sugar added to it. And so that way you get the peach flavors to enjoy with it, okay? So that is a white tea. They are considered to have more health benefits because they're processed the least. All right, let's talk about green tea now. So green tea goes through one of 2 processes when they're stopping the oxidation method. They either steam it or they pan fire it. Really, that just depends on where it's coming from as far as whether or not they pan fire it or steam it to stop that process. But green tea, same as white tea, it's plucked, it's allowed to wither, and then it is either steamed or pan fired to stop the oxidation process. Then you get a tea, you get a bright green or pale golden green color and it has some grassy notes to it if it's been steamed, or maybe even a vegetal or nutty flavor when it has been pan fired. So you kind of get some different flavors going on with that. So here's and I'm sorry, it is also, once the oxidation process is stopped, it is rolled or pressed to finish the process of making green tea. So you can kind of see some of the green tea on my hand. Here's the tea, and this is the Moroccan mint. It smells so good. This is what I'm drinking right now, friends. So good stuff. All right, moving on to black tea. This is what, especially if you're down here in the South with me in Texas, the majority of us are used to drinking, okay? Or you might have even called it as Orn Pico tea, okay? And I'll give you a brief explanation of what that is and why here in just a second. But black tea is a tea that is allowed to have full oxidation. So it didn't just get a tiny bit, it got a lot of oxidation, and that's why it gets its color. And of course, it looks pretty black as far as that goes in color. It comes out more brown in your cup. And even my tea, because mine is a loose leaf black tea, even though it looks small and tiny, it's a loose leaf black tea. And so because of the type of tea that I use and how organic it is, it actually comes out more of a kind of a golden brown color. It looks kind of dark when you have a bunch of it, but it's really not, and it smells fantastic. It's such a great quality tea. And it's the difference between going to McDonald's and getting a cup of tea versus having a good, solid, nice cup of tea that's been made correctly. And if you're not sure how to make a cup of tea correctly or how to steep some tea, look for my other video and you can watch on how to do that. Okay, so back to black tea. It undergoes the full oxidation process. They pluck it, they wither, then they roll and sort and oxidize the tea. Once it has fully oxidized, they do pan firing to dry and stop any more oxidation process, and then they grate the tea. And this is where that orange pekoe comes in, because orange pekoe is actually a grading system for tea, for black tea. It's a grading system. So, and that'll be a whole nother video as well, because reading about it, there's a lot of information to process. So it's definitely not in this video in that depth, but it is a grading method in which they use to determine the type of tea that is being used, okay? So they'll look at it by appearance, they'll look at it by how it's done and size and whatnot, and then they'll kind of determine from that. What the lowest classification is dusting or dust type tea, and that is once they're done sorting and sifting and doing, and those of us have purchased the nice loose leaf good quality tea that's going to give you a lot of flavor, what's left over is what is usually sold in bulk, and it's become your mass-produced tea. It's what's in your bottled tea most of the time. It's a lot of times what you get when you're going through a fast food restaurant, because tea is not their forte. It's not what they plan on doing, and therefore they're gonna go with the cheapest tea they can possibly buy and go from there. So that is how that happens, and that's how you end up with your tea at the stores. Okay, so that's black tea. Now we're gonna talk about oolong, okay? So the tea that I have to show you is actually an oolong and white tea blend. It's my Blueberry Best. So you'll see a little bit of the white tea in there as well, but we're gonna talk about the oolong part of this tea. So oolong is a semi-fermented leaf that's been withered in the sunlight. So after it's been plucked, it's been allowed to wither and ferment in the sunlight for several hours. And then it's carefully shaken and rolled and lightly bruised, and then it's spread out to finish the drying process. Once it gets to a dry enough consistency, they pan fire it and stop the oxidation process. Usually comes out kind of as a light greenish in color when it's steeped. Some of mine almost is a golden color. Now my Blueberry Best, if you look at it in the sunlight when it's fully made, it almost has a bluish hue to it. So, you know, I mean, just fun little things that happen when you're steeping tea, right? And it helps that one has some added fruit in it, so it gets those extra colors going on. But it's a great tea, okay? the flavors range from a light and floral color to fruity and even buttery, depending on the oolong and what it has in it, okay? So if you're not sure if you like an oolong, come out to the Rockwell Farmers Market. We'll be there this weekend and you can try some blueberry best. All right, so the next tea we're gonna talk about is Pu'er. And yes, it does sound just like you think it sounds. Pu'er, that's how you say it. It is not how it's spelled, but it's a Chinese name, so it's a little hard to translate into English and not sound like we're a bunch of boys being children. So anyway, Pu'er, it's named for a town in Yunnan province of China. The unique processing gives it a long shelf life. So this process, it's plucked, it's withered, and then while it's slightly moist, they put it in a big pile and let it ferment. They let the bacteria start to build and grow. It's the natural bacteria. Kind of like when you're aging your wines or your beers, the yeast or the bacteria, things start to build up in there. And during this process, they are watching it. They're looking for a specific way, and once it's ready, then they move on to the next process, which is allowing it to, once it's done, they will then either allow it to fully oxidize or they will pan fire it. So if it becomes fully oxidized, like we learned with our fully oxidized black tea, it becomes a black Pu'er tea. And then you can have a Pu'er green tea when they pan fire it and stop oxidation. Okay, so it's just a different type of process. Then they compact it into this brick and they make it into shapes. And so that could be a square, it could be a circle, it could be a pyramid, it could be whatever shape they want it to be, okay? Its flavors can be smooth, fruity, grassy, smoky, and even a musky flavor. I do not have any Pu'er for you to see today. Maybe in the next video when we discuss it, I will have some for you, but not today. Our next tea we're going to talk about is an herbal tea, okay? So our next tea is an herbal tea. And herbal teas, or tisane, which is the French word for fruits or herbs or plants that have been steeped in hot water. Herbal teas are teas that are made from fruit, flowers, other types of bark, or even herbs, different things that are edible in nature that you can steep and then drink, okay? So that's an herbal tea. And the herbal tea and herbal teas do not come from the Camellia sinensis or Camellia Assam plant. They do not have any caffeine. They're caffeine free. It's just the different herbs or flowers or fruit or spices or bark that you may put in there, okay? So this is Maui Breeze. It has coconut, papaya, pineapple, and then it also has hibiscus and some rose hips in it to give it a beautiful color and flavor. And so it's an herbal tea. Yeah. And they're very yummy. The ones I have are very fruity in flavor. And we find that it's very popular with families with children. It's an option that doesn't have caffeine. With mine, it's organic, so you don't have any other processed food or processed sugars or things that are in it that you wouldn't want your children to have. There's no red food dyes or other types of food dyes. It's all organic, all natural, very good stuff. Definitely a great caffeine-free option. The last tea we are going to discuss, the last tea type, is what's called rooibos. The word looks like rooibos, but it's rooibos. And rooibos tea is a red herbal tea from South Africa. It comes from a fermented leaves of the Aspalathus, maybe? I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. Laniaris shrub in South Africa. It's sweet and delicate and has earthy flavors. So this is a rooibos tea, okay, with a little bit of lemongrass in there. So it is definitely red. It is not like your black tea. It also allows for a caffeine-free option. There's no caffeine in it because it doesn't come from the Camellia sinensis plant. And so it gives you a caffeine-free tea option as well. So hopefully you saw one that interests you. Feel free to do a little more research on it. If you have any questions, put that down in the comments and I will get back to you and see if I can come up with an answer. I will be at the Rockwell Farmers Market this weekend, so if you want to try any of these types of teas, I do not have any rooibos at this time to actually try. This is just some that I still had, because I don't sell any rooibos yet. But if you want to try any of the other types of teas, feel free to come out and have some samples. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you the next time. Bye.